Hi guys, and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight you are stepping into a frozen evening in 1876, where the wooden walls of a stagecoach creak softly beneath a blanket of falling snow, and the distant glow of a frontier town fades behind you. You can feel the cold air brushing your cheeks as you climb aboard, carrying blankets, a small bag, and the quiet hope that this journey will be less dramatic than the stories people tell around warm fireplaces. Although, fair warning, you probably won't survive this journey comfortably if you expect heated seats, smooth roads, or even a polite little travel pillow waiting for your arrival. Frontier luxury is a very generous phrase here, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me where you're listening from and what your local time is. It is always fascinating to imagine these old journeys unfolding across the world while someone listens from a completely different corner of the map. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and allow yourself to drift back to a winter night when a simple stagecoach ride could become an unforgettable adventure. You stand beside the dusty street of a frontier settlement, though tonight the dust has disappeared beneath a soft layer of snow. The buildings around you are quiet, their wooden walls catching the pale light from oil lamps glowing behind small windows. Somewhere nearby, a horse stamps its hoof against the frozen ground, sending a sharp sound through the still air. The smell of smoke from a nearby stove mixes with the scent of leather, hay, and cold winter wind. It is not exactly the welcoming aroma of a modern hotel lobby, but in 1876 this is the doorway to a long night of travel. You pull your coat tighter and look at the stagecoach waiting for you. It is sturdy, practical, and built for survival rather than comfort. The vehicle sits high on its wheels, with a narrow body that promises adventure and a suspicious lack of personal space. You might look at it and wonder how anyone managed to sleep inside such a small moving box. The answer is simple. People adapted because they had to. When there were no highways, airplanes, or comfortable trains connecting every corner of the country, stagecoaches carried people, letters, supplies, and news across enormous distances. The year is 1876, a time when the American frontier is changing quickly. The completion of the first major transcontinental railroad years earlier has already transformed travel. But stagecoaches still serve places where rail lines cannot reach. Remote communities depend on them to connect with larger towns. You are traveling through a world where a journey of a few hundred miles can feel like an expedition into the unknown. As you climb inside, your boots knock against the wooden floor. The sound is hollow and echoing. The interior is dim, lit only by small lamps and the occasional flicker of light entering through the windows. The seats are covered in worn fabric, shaped by countless travellers who have sat exactly where you are now. You settle in carefully, realizing that the coach was designed to carry passengers, not to provide a private sleeping chamber. Personal space is more of a charming suggestion. Around you, other travellers adjust their belongings. A businessman protects a small case containing important papers. A woman carefully arranges a bundle of blankets. Another passenger checks a pocket watch, perhaps wondering if the driver can somehow convince the horses to hurry through the snow. The answer is probably no. Even the most determined driver cannot negotiate with a storm. The horses outside are powerful animals, their breath rising like small clouds in the freezing air. They are the true engines of this journey. A stagecoach driver must understand their condition, the road ahead, and the unpredictable weather. Driving one of these coaches requires patience and experience. The driver listens to the animals, watches the trail, and makes constant decisions that passengers rarely notice. You hear the final preparations before departure. Harnesses tighten, wooden parts shift. The driver calls out softly. The horses begin to move, and the coach slowly rolls away from the safety of the town. The wheels crunch over snow-covered ground, creating a rhythm that almost feels like a lullaby. Almost every few moments. The coach bumps over hidden patches of ice, reminding you that this is not a peaceful carriage ride through a carefully maintained park. A curious little detail from the era is that some travellers carried unusual remedies and personal comforts on long journeys. Frontier travellers were known to use all kinds of homemade solutions for protecting themselves from the harsh environment. Some even carried mixtures containing strange ingredients believed to help with skin protection or health. It makes modern travellers appreciate the simple luxury of sunscreen bottles, comfortable jackets, and climate-controlled vehicles. As darkness settles completely, you begin to understand the strange beauty of this journey. The outside world becomes a blur of white snow and black trees. The stagecoach feels like a small floating room moving through a silent wilderness. The people around you speak quietly, sharing fragments of their lives. Someone mentions a distant family member. Someone else talks about a new town they hope to reach. Their voices rise and fall with the motion of the coach. Historians still argue whether stagecoach travel created stronger community connections because strangers were forced into close shared experiences, or whether the hardship simply made people appreciate privacy even more. Perhaps the answer depends on the traveller. Some may have found friendship in those cramped seats, while others may have dreamed of arriving quickly and never sharing elbow space with another passenger again. You lean against the side of the coach, feeling every movement beneath you. The wooden frame groans gently. Snow taps against the windows. The cold tries to enter through every tiny gap. But the blankets and the warmth of nearby travellers create a small pocket of comfort. You're beginning to realize that sleeping during this journey is not about perfect rest. It is about surrendering to the rhythm of the road. Outside, the frontier stretches endlessly. Inside, you're surrounded by strangers who are temporarily part of your story. The storm has not yet reached its full strength, and the trail ahead still disappears into darkness. The stagecoach continues forward, carrying you deeper into the snowy night, where every mile brings new sounds, new challenges, and new memories waiting quietly beneath the falling snow. The stagecoach sways gently beneath you as the last lights of the frontier town vanish behind the curtain of falling snow. You're no longer standing on a familiar street surrounded by buildings and voices. You're now inside a moving wooden shelter, carried forward by 4 determined horses and the steady hands of a driver who knows that every mile has its own personality. The coach feels almost alive tonight. The boards creak, the wheels complain, and the leather straps sing their own quiet song whenever the horses pull harder through the snow. You shift in your seat and study the small world around you. Every object inside this stagecoach has a purpose. There is no extra decoration, no unnecessary comfort, and certainly no space wasted on things that only look impressive. The frontier does not reward decoration. It rewards usefulness. A blanket keeps you warm. A lantern helps you see. A sturdy coat keeps the cold away. Everything has earned its place. The passengers around you begin settling into the reality of the journey. At first, everyone sat with the careful politeness of strangers. Now, after hours together, The invisible walls between people begin to soften. Someone offers a small piece of food. Another traveller shares a story from a previous trip. A quiet passenger who seemed determined not to speak suddenly laughs at a joke. The stagecoach creates a strange temporary community, one that exists only between departure and arrival. You notice how different travel feels in this world. Today, you might complain if a journey takes too long because a train is delayed or a flight is uncomfortable. In 1876, delays are measured differently. A storm, a broken wheel, an exhausted horse, or a difficult trail can transform a simple trip into a serious challenge. Travellers do not just move through landscapes, they negotiate with them. The stagecoach itself is a fascinating piece of frontier engineering. These coaches are designed to handle rough terrain, with strong frames and suspension systems meant to reduce the punishment of uneven roads. The famous Concorde-style stagecoaches, built in the 19th century, became symbols of American overland travel because of their durability. Their leather suspension helps soften the constant bouncing. Though your back may politely disagree after several hours on the road, you place your hand against the wooden wall and feel the vibrations travelling through the coach. Every bump tells a story about the land beneath you. The trail is not a smooth path waiting to welcome travellers. It is a changing surface of frozen mud, packed snow, stones, and hidden obstacles. The driver must read the road almost like a person reading a handwritten letter in poor lighting. The smell inside the coach slowly changes as the journey continues. Earlier, you noticed the fresh scent of cold air and leather. Now there is also the warmth of wool blankets, the faint aroma of food wrapped for travel, and the smoky scent clinging to clothing from earlier hours near the town's fires. It is a very specific combination, one that belongs to a time when every traveller carried traces of their environment with them. A small leather bag beside one passenger catches your attention. It contains personal items carefully packed for the journey. Travellers often carried small necessities because stopping places were limited and unpredictable. There were no convenience stores appearing every few miles, waiting with snacks, drinks, and chargers. The closest thing to a travel emergency kit might include food, medicine, spare clothing, and items that could help with unexpected delays. A quirky detail from the era is that some stagecoach travellers developed personal habits for surviving the constant motion. Some people believe that sitting in certain positions could reduce discomfort, while others tried unusual methods to avoid feeling sick from the rocking movement. Human beings have always been creative when trying to convince themselves that a difficult situation is slightly easier. You look toward the window and watch snowflakes collect briefly before being swept away by the movement of the coach. The darkness outside feels enormous. There are no streetlights, no glowing signs, and no distant sounds of traffic. The frontier night surrounds you completely. It is peaceful, but it also reminds you how small this moving coach really is compared with the wilderness around it. The driver's world is especially demanding, while you and the other passengers attempt to rest. The driver remains focused. The reins must be handled carefully. The horses need attention. The trail must be watched constantly. A driver cannot simply relax because the journey has become familiar. Nature has a way of changing the rules without asking permission. You hear the driver occasionally speak to the horses in a calm voice. These are not just animals pulling a machine, they are partners in a difficult task. A skilled driver understands their energy, their limits, and their reactions to weather. The relationship between humans and working animals is one of the quiet foundations of frontier life. Historians still debate whether stagecoach journeys were remembered mostly as symbols of freedom and adventure, or whether ordinary travellers viewed them as exhausting necessities required for daily survival. The romantic image of the frontier often highlights courage and exploration, but the everyday reality also included discomfort, waiting, and uncertainty. Both versions can exist at the same time. As the hours pass, you begin to notice the small rituals of the coach. Passengers adjust blankets, someone checks the time, someone whispers about how much farther remains, the driver listens to the horses. Everyone participates in a quiet dance of patience. Nobody expects the journey to be easy, but everyone hopes it will be successful. You slowly become comfortable with the movement. The constant rocking that once seemed distracting now becomes familiar. Your body begins to understand the rhythm. The wooden walls creak in a pattern. The wheels roll and pause. The horses breathe and step forward. The storm waits somewhere ahead, but for this moment, you are suspended between the warmth of the coach and the endless frozen world outside. The stagecoach continues through the snowy darkness, carrying you farther from the familiar and deeper into the frontier night. Every traveller inside has a destination, but for now, the journey itself is the story. The road stretches ahead, hidden beneath snow, and the small wooden coach keeps moving. The stagecoach rolls onward, and behind you the frontier town becomes nothing more than a memory hidden beneath the snowfall. You can still imagine the warm squares of light from the windows, the smoke rising from chimneys, and the quiet conversations of people who are safely indoors. But those sounds are fading now. The only world that remains is the road ahead, the steady movement of the horses, and the endless winter landscape surrounding you. You press closer to the window and watch the final signs of settlement disappear. A fence line becomes a dark shape in the distance. A small barn fades into the snowy horizon. A familiar trail marker passes by and vanishes behind the coach. It feels almost like crossing a doorway. On one side is the comfort of human company and predictable routines. On the other side is a landscape where every mile requires attention. The frontier is not empty, even when it appears empty. Beneath the snow are paths used by travellers, hunters, traders, and local communities. The land carries stories that are easy to miss when you're only passing through. You move through forests, open fields, and frozen stretches where the wind has the freedom to travel without interruption, inside the coach. The passengers grow quieter. The excitement of departure has settled into the patience of travel. Earlier, everyone was focused on leaving. Now everyone is focused on continuing. This is one of the strange experiences of old journeys. The beginning feels full of possibility, the middle feels endless, and the arrival feels almost impossible to imagine. You notice how much trust is placed in the driver and the horses. Today, when you travel, you expect maps, signs, navigation systems, and constant updates. In 1876, passengers often had to accept uncertainty. They knew the general route, but the details belonged to the people guiding them. A traveller could not simply check a glowing screen and discover the nearest warm building. Instead, they relied on experience, memory, and local knowledge. The stagecoach routes connected communities across large distances. One of the most important networks was operated by companies that carried passengers and mail across the frontier. Although the famous Pony Express had ended years earlier in 1861, its legend remained powerful. and the idea of rapid communication across vast distances continued to capture people's imagination. By your journey in 1876, stagecoaches were still important in areas where railroads had not yet reached. You listened to the sounds around you. The wheels occasionally hit a harder patch of frozen ground, causing everyone inside to shift at the same moment. A small laugh escapes from one passenger as everyone tries to pretend they were not surprised by the sudden movement. Even discomfort can become funny when shared with others. The cold outside has a personality of its own. It creeps across the landscape and settles into every quiet corner. Snow covers branches, softens hills, and transforms familiar shapes into strange forms. A tree that looks ordinary during summer becomes something mysterious under a layer of white. The frontier changes with the seasons, and winter reveals a different version of the world. You pull your blanket higher and feel the rough texture of the fabric against your hands. It is not a luxurious blanket from a comfortable bedroom. It is a practical companion meant to protect travelers from harsh conditions. The people of this era understood that survival often depended on simple objects working exactly when they were needed. A curious little piece of frontier life is that travelers sometimes carried personal good luck charms during journeys. These could include small religious items, family keepsakes, or objects believed to bring protection. Some people placed great confidence in these tiny reminders of home while facing uncertain roads. It shows that even in an age of practical survival, people still searched for comfort in symbols and traditions. The coach continues away from the settlement, and you begin to feel the scale of the frontier. The distance between places is not just measured in miles, it is measured in time, effort, and endurance. A location that seems close on a map can still require many hours of difficult travel. The land demands respect. You glance at the other passengers and imagine their reasons for making this journey. Perhaps one person is travelling toward a new opportunity. Perhaps another is returning to family after months away. Someone may be searching for a new beginning. Every person inside the coach carries a private story. And tonight those stories briefly share the same wooden walls. Historians still argue whether frontier travel encouraged a stronger sense of independence among ordinary people, or whether it created greater dependence on networks of cooperation. The stagecoach journey seems to suggest both. Each traveller must endure personal discomfort, but nobody reaches the destination alone. Drivers, stable workers, passengers, and communities all play a role. As the night grows deeper, the frontier town feels impossibly far away. You no longer think about simply travelling from one place to another. You're experiencing a slower world, where movement requires awareness. Every sound matters. Every change in weather matters. Every decision matters. The horses continue their careful pace. Their hooves create a steady rhythm beneath the stormy sky. The coach rocks gently from side to side, and the darkness outside becomes less frightening and more familiar. You begin to understand that the frontier is not only a place, it is an experience of waiting, adapting, and continuing forward. Ahead of you lies more snow, more road, and more uncertainty. The storm clouds gather in the distance, but for now the stagecoach keeps moving. You settle deeper into your seat, listening to the sounds of travel that have carried countless people across this landscape. The journey has truly begun, and the frozen trail is slowly revealing its secrets. The coach settles into a steady rhythm as the last traces of the frontier settlement disappear completely behind you. You're now surrounded by the deep quiet of the winter road. The darkness outside the small windows feels almost endless. Yet inside this wooden carriage there is a strange sense of togetherness. You're no longer simply sitting among strangers. You're sharing a moving shelter, a temporary home that creaks and sways its way across the frozen landscape. You adjust your position, searching for the most comfortable place on the narrow seat. Comfort is a flexible idea tonight. Your shoulders know every bump in the trail. Your legs are aware of every inch of limited space. The stagecoach does not gently carry you like a modern vehicle gliding over smooth pavement. Instead, it reminds you constantly that you're travelling through a world where the road is part of the adventure. These sounds become familiar after a while. The wheels turn with a heavy wooden rhythm. The leather straps shift with each movement of the coach. The horses breathe deeply outside, their steps creating a pattern that almost feels like a slow heartbeat. Every now and then, the driver calls out, and the horses respond with a small change in pace. You begin to notice the details that would normally escape your attention. A small crack in the wooden wall allows a thin stream of cold air to enter. A passenger quietly pulls a blanket closer. Someone unwraps a small meal, and the scent of preserved food briefly fills the coach. Another traveller closes their eyes, attempting to rest despite the constant movement. Sleeping inside a stagecoach is not a simple matter of lying down and drifting away. The body has to learn a new kind of rest. You cannot stretch out completely. You cannot turn onto a soft mattress. You cannot adjust the temperature with a small button. Instead, you learn to relax while sitting upright, allowing the motion of the coach to become part of the experience. People in the 19th century became skilled at adapting to difficult travel conditions. Before widespread automobiles and modern transportation networks, long-distance movement required preparation and patience. Stagecoach passengers carried what they needed because they could not depend on finding supplies whenever they wanted. A traveller who forgot an important item might discover that a small mistake could become a major inconvenience. The coach itself reflects the practical creativity of the era. Builders understood that these vehicles needed to survive rough trails, changing weather, and heavy use. The famous Concorde coaches, developed in the early 19th century, became known for their strong construction and distinctive leather suspension system. The design helped absorb some of the shock from uneven roads. Though your tired back might suggest that the word smooth should be used carefully, you look around at the passengers and realize everyone has developed their own method of coping with the journey. One person leans toward the window, hoping to find a better position. Another carefully protects their belongings from the constant movement. Someone else seems perfectly comfortable, which feels slightly unfair after your struggle to find a comfortable corner. A small and surprising detail from frontier travel is that some passengers carried oranges or lemons on longer trips because they believed citrus could help maintain health during difficult journeys. These items were not always easy to obtain in remote areas, making them a special treat rather than an everyday snack. A simple piece of fruit could represent preparation, care, and a reminder of home. The darkness outside encourages imagination. Without the distractions of modern life, you become aware of every sound and sensation. The wind moving through the trees sounds louder. The horse's footsteps seem more important. The occasional movement of another passenger becomes part of the story unfolding around you. You imagine the countless people who travelled similar routes before and after this night. They carried letters, business documents, family belongings, and personal dreams. A stagecoach was not merely transportation, It was a connection between communities separated by enormous distances. It carried pieces of everyday life across a landscape that often seemed determined to slow everyone down. The journey also reveals something about human patience. Today, waiting can feel unusual. A few minutes without a response can seem frustrating. But travellers in 1876 understood waiting as a normal part of existence. They waited for weather to improve, for roads to become passable, for animals to rest, and for destinations to finally appear. Researchers continue to examine whether the isolation of frontier travel created stronger emotional bonds between strangers, or whether the hardships mainly encouraged people to protect their own personal space. The answer may depend on the individual traveller. Some passengers remembered these journeys as meaningful shared experiences, while others likely remembered only the cold, the bumps, and the desperate wish to arrive. You listen to the quiet conversations around you. A few words drift through the darkness. Stories are exchanged in pieces, never fully completed before the coach shifts again and someone loses their train of thought. There is something comforting about these unfinished conversations. Nobody needs to tell their entire life story. A few sentences are enough when people know they are temporarily travelling together. The snow outside becomes thicker, and the world beyond the windows turns into a moving painting of white and grey. Tree branches bend under the weight of snow. Open fields disappear into darkness. The trail ahead is known only to the driver and the experienced eyes guiding the horses. You close your eyes for a moment and allow yourself to feel the movement. The coach rises and falls gently. The sounds blend together. The cold remains present. But you are surrounded by signs of human effort. The blankets, the lantern, the wooden walls, the careful driver, and the patient horses all work together to create a small island of warmth. The stagecoach is not comfortable by modern standards, but it has a certain charm. It carries you through a slower world where every mile matters. Every sound has meaning. Every traveller has a reason for being there. Every moment becomes part of the memory. As the coach continues deeper into the snowy night, you begin to understand that this journey is not only about reaching the next stop. It is about experiencing the fragile balance between human determination and the powerful forces of nature. The storm is approaching, the road is growing more difficult, and the quiet wooden coach continues forward into the unknown. The gentle rhythm of the stagecoach begins to change as the weather announces that it has more plans for you tonight. At first, the snow outside seemed almost peaceful, like a soft curtain falling across the frontier. Now the wind grows stronger, pushing against the wooden walls and finding every tiny opening it can reach. The coach continues forward, but the trail ahead feels less certain with every passing minute. You notice the driver becoming more alert. The relaxed posture from earlier disappears. The reins are held with greater attention, and the driver watches the road with the careful focus of someone reading a difficult message written across the snow. The horses slow slightly, their movements becoming more deliberate. They are powerful animals, but even they must respect a winter storm inside the coach. The passengers notice the change as well. Conversations become shorter. Laughter fades into quiet observation. Everyone listens to the sounds outside. The wind rises and falls, sometimes whispering softly and sometimes pushing against the coach, with enough force to make the wooden frame groan. The storm has become a companion. Although not the kind anyone invited, You pull your blanket closer and look around the small interior. The stagecoach suddenly feels even smaller than before. The warmth from other passengers matters more now. The lantern light appears softer. The familiar smell of wool, leather, and travel supplies creates a sense of protection against the frozen world beyond the walls. Winter storms were one of the greatest challenges faced by 19th century travellers. Roads that seemed manageable in clear weather could become dangerous under heavy snow. Before modern forecasting systems, travellers often depended on local knowledge, observation, and experience to judge approaching conditions. A driver might recognize changes in the wind, cloud patterns, or animal behavior and adjust the journey accordingly. You realize that the driver is not simply following a path. The driver is making constant decisions. Should the horses continue at the current pace? Is the trail still safe? Is there enough daylight or shelter ahead? These choices could determine whether a journey continued smoothly or became much more difficult. The stagecoach moves through the storm with slow determination. Snow gathers around the wheels. The horses push forward, their bodies working hard against the cold. The driver speaks calmly, offering reassurance through a steady voice. Animals, like people, respond to confidence. A nervous driver creates nervous horses, and nervous horses create a very unpleasant travel experience for everyone inside. A curious little piece of frontier weather knowledge is that some travellers paid close attention to unusual natural signs, including the behaviour of animals when preparing for storms. Some believed certain bird movements or animal habits could predict changing weather. Modern science does not support every old belief, but these observations show how closely people once watched the natural world around them. The coach rocks more strongly now. You place a hand against the seat to steady yourself. Every movement reminds you that the road is not a simple line across the land. It is a living challenge shaped by weather, geography, and timing. A journey that began with confidence can quickly become a test of patience. You think about the people who depended on routes like this for everyday life. Stagecoaches carried more than passengers seeking adventure. They transported mail, supplies, newspapers, and important information between communities in remote areas. The arrival of a stagecoach could bring news from the outside world and connect isolated settlements with distant places. The storm creates a strange kind of silence. Even though the wind is loud, the landscape itself feels hidden. Trees disappear into the darkness. Open spaces become invisible. The world seems reduced to a small circle of lantern light. The movement of the horses and the people sitting beside you. You imagine what it must have felt like for travellers who had never experienced such a journey before. Perhaps some passengers entered the coach with excitement, imagining the frontier as a place of opportunity and discovery. Now, surrounded by snow and darkness, they are reminded that the frontier offers beauty and difficulty together. Experts remain divided on whether frontier storms strengthen the culture of preparedness and cooperation among travellers, or whether they mainly expose the risks of expanding into harsh environments. The answer is complicated because frontier life required both independence and reliance on others. A person needed personal courage, but survival often depended on shared knowledge and assistance. The passengers begin quietly helping one another. Someone adjusts a blanket for another traveller. Someone checks that a bag is secure. A small act of kindness feels larger in a place where everyone understands the same discomfort. The storm has changed the mood inside the coach. These people are no longer just passengers sharing a ride. They're companions facing the same uncertain road. Outside, the wind continues to sweep across the frontier. Snow covers the tracks left behind by the coach, almost erasing evidence that anyone passed through at all. It creates a feeling of temporary existence, as if the journey is happening inside a dream that the storm could hide at any moment. You close your eyes and listen. The coach creaks, the horses move, the wind surrounds you. Each sound becomes part of a strange winter melody. It is not a peaceful night in the way a person might imagine from the comfort of home, but there is something calming about the steady determination of everyone involved. The storm has arrived, but the journey continues. The stagecoach does not stop simply because the weather has become difficult. It moves carefully, patiently, and cautiously through the snow. Ahead lies a darker stretch of trail, and behind lies the settlement you left hours ago. You settle deeper into your seat, accepting that tonight will not be about comfort. It will be about endurance. It will be about listening, waiting, and trusting the people and animals carrying you forward. The frontier has revealed its colder side, and the snowy road is only beginning to show what it can demand. The storm continues outside, but inside the stagecoach something changes. The darkness that once separated everyone now seems to bring people closer together. The passengers who began the journey as unfamiliar faces have slowly become part of the same small world. In the dim lantern light, surrounded by the sounds of wind and wheels, you begin to learn the stories hidden behind each person's quiet expression. You notice the businessman sitting across from you. Earlier, he seemed focused only on his papers and belongings. Now, with the storm slowing conversation and forcing everyone to remain present, he begins sharing pieces of his life. He speaks about travelling between towns, making deals, and trying to build a future in a place where opportunities appear and disappear quickly. Beside him sits a woman carefully holding a wrapped bundle. At first, you assumed it contained ordinary travel supplies, but she explains that it holds small personal items from her family home. The bundle is not valuable because of money. Its importance comes from memory. On a journey through a difficult landscape, a familiar object can make a person feel connected to the life they left behind. Another passenger, quieter than the others, finally begins speaking. He tells stories about previous trips through similar weather. His voice carries the confidence of someone who has learned that storms should be respected but not feared. He describes frozen roads, unexpected delays, and the strange friendships that can form when people are forced to share uncomfortable spaces for long periods. You listen carefully because these stories make the journey feel larger. The stagecoach is not just carrying bodies from one location to another. It is carrying experiences, hopes, worries, and memories. Every person inside has entered the coach with a different purpose, but the storm has temporarily connected their lives. This type of shared travel was common in the 19th century. Stagecoach passengers often spent many hours together, sometimes several days depending on distance and conditions, unlike modern transportation, where passengers can disappear into headphones or separate spaces. Stagecoach travel encouraged conversation. Privacy was limited, so social interaction became part of the journey whether people planned for it or not. You glance around the coach and notice how everyone has created small routines. One traveller checks the lantern, another rearranges supplies, someone offers a small piece of food. These simple actions bring order to an uncertain night. Humans have always searched for familiar patterns when surrounded by unpredictable situations. The storm outside makes every small comfort feel important. A shared story becomes warmer than a thick blanket. A friendly voice becomes a reminder that you are not alone. The sound of another person laughing quietly can make a cold night feel slightly less harsh. A fascinating detail from the era is that some Stagecoach passengers brought small books, newspapers, or letters to read during long journeys when conditions allowed. Printed materials were valuable because they provided entertainment and information in places where news travelled slowly. A newspaper arriving by Stagecoach could be a major event for a distant community. You imagine someone opening a newspaper after weeks of waiting, discovering news from cities far away. In a world without instant communication, information moved at the pace of horses and wheels. A simple piece of printed paper connected people across enormous distances. The passengers continue talking, and you realize that everyone has their own relationship with the frontier. For some, it represents freedom and possibility. For others, it represents challenge and uncertainty. The same landscape can inspire one person while intimidating another. Researchers continue exploring whether the close social conditions of frontier travel created stronger habits of cooperation than modern transportation allows. Some believe shared hardship encouraged people to trust strangers more easily. Others suggest that people simply tolerated temporary closeness because there were few alternatives. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between those ideas. You listen as the quiet passenger tells another story about a traveller who once carried an unusual object for luck. He describes a person who believed a tiny carved wooden figure protected them during difficult journeys. Whether the object had any power was impossible to prove, but the traveller felt more confident carrying it. Sometimes comfort comes from belief as much as practicality. The conversation slowly becomes softer as the night continues. People begin conserving energy. The storm requires patience, and patience requires rest. The stagecoach becomes a place of whispers and half-closed eyes. Even the most talkative passengers eventually surrender to the steady rhythm of the road. You lean your head back and feel the movement of the coach beneath you. The voices around you blend with the sounds of the storm. You no longer hear only strangers. You hear companions. Their stories have transformed the darkness into something more human. Outside, the frontier remains vast and unforgiving. Snow continues falling over forests and open land. The road ahead remains uncertain. Yet inside this small wooden carriage, there is warmth created by people rather than by fire. The passengers have become a temporary family of travellers, connected by circumstance and shared experience. You think about how different this moment feels from the beginning of the journey. When you first climbed aboard, everyone seemed separate. Now, after hours of cold and movement, small connections have formed. A shared glance, a quiet joke, a helpful gesture. These things matter more when conditions are difficult. The stagecoach moves onward through the storm, carrying not just passengers but stories. Every person inside contributes something to the journey. The driver provides skill, the horses provide strength, the travellers provide companionship. Together, they create a fragile but determined team moving through the winter night. As you close your eyes again, you understand that the darkness outside is not completely empty. It contains the sound of the road, the memory of past travellers, and the quiet conversations of the people beside you. The storm may make the world feel smaller, but inside the coach, the human world feels a little larger. The conversations inside the stagecoach slowly fade as the night grows deeper. One by one, the passengers become quieter, allowing the steady motion of the coach and the sound of the storm to take over. You remain awake for a little longer, listening to the world around you. The wooden walls shift with every turn. The horses continue their careful steps. The wind moves across the frontier like a living thing searching through the darkness. You realize that nighttime travel has a different feeling from daytime travel. During the day, the landscape provides information. You can see hills, trees, rivers, and distant buildings. At night, much of that disappears. The driver must depend on memory, experience, and small clues hidden in the environment. The trail becomes less of a visible path and more of a relationship between the traveller and the land. The lantern inside the coach creates a small circle of warmth. Outside that circle is a vast frozen world. You look through the window and see only occasional shapes passing by. A dark line of trees, a patch of open snow, a brief glimpse of the horses moving ahead. Then everything disappears again into the storm. You pull your blanket around your shoulders and try to find rest. Sleeping upright requires patience. Your body searches for the comfort of a proper bed. But the stagecoach offers something very different. The seat beneath you is firm. The movement never completely stops. The cold occasionally reminds you that the frontier is not interested in making things easy. Yet there is something strangely soothing about the repetition. The same sounds return again and again. Wheels turning, horses stepping, wind blowing, passengers breathing quietly. The coach creates its own rhythm, almost like a song without words. Travellers in this period often had to understand the importance of preparation. A journey across the frontier was rarely just about buying a ticket and showing up. People planned clothing, food, supplies, and timing carefully. A forgotten item could mean discomfort for hours or even days. The ability to prepare was one of the most valuable skills a traveller could have. You notice the driver occasionally checking the conditions outside, a small movement of the reins, a careful look toward the trail. A moment of silence before deciding the next step. These actions happen almost unnoticed, but they reveal the experience required to guide a stagecoach through difficult weather. The horses are impressive companions tonight. They continue forward despite the cold and heavy snow. Their strength makes the journey possible, but their limits must also be respected. A good driver understands that pushing too hard can create greater problems later. Patience is not weakness on the frontier. Patience is survival. A lesser-known detail from winter travel is that some travellers carried small heated stones or bricks wrapped in cloth to provide extra warmth during long journeys. These simple warming methods were used in homes and vehicles before modern heating systems existed. It is a reminder that people of the past constantly searched for clever ways to make uncomfortable situations more manageable. You imagine a traveller carefully preparing such a warming item before leaving home, knowing that a long night on the road awaited them. Small inventions and personal habits often made the difference between a miserable journey and one that could be endured. The storm continues around you, but the stagecoach keeps moving. There is a quiet bravery in this ordinary act. Nobody inside is trying to become a legend. They are simply trying to reach their destination. Frontier history is filled not only with famous explorers and dramatic events, but also with ordinary people completing difficult tasks day after day. The darkness creates a feeling of timelessness. For a moment, you forget that you're travelling through the year 1876. You could almost imagine generations of travellers experiencing similar nights before you. The details change, but the basic human experience remains familiar. People still search for comfort. People still worry about reaching their destination. People still find friendship in unexpected places. Academic discussions continue around the question of whether frontier hardships truly created more independent people, or whether the challenges encourage stronger dependence on neighbours and communities. The image of the lone traveller is powerful, but real journeys often depended on many people working together behind the scenes. You think about everyone connected to this stagecoach route, the person who maintained the vehicle, the workers who cared for the horses, the people who prepared supplies, the communities waiting at distant stations. Even a quiet overnight journey depends on many unseen efforts. As the hours pass, your thoughts become slower. The movement of the coach begins blending with your imagination. The storm outside feels less like a threat and more like a distant presence. You're still aware of the cold and the uncertainty, but you also feel a strange calm settling over the journey. The passengers around you have mostly fallen asleep. Their breathing rises and falls gently with the movement of the coach. Someone shifts position. A blanket moves. The lantern flickers softly. These small sounds remind you that you are travelling with others through this winter night. Outside, the trail continues beneath layers of snow. The stagecoach leaves temporary marks behind it, but the wind slowly covers them. The frontier has a way of erasing evidence of human movement, reminding travellers that they are guests in a much larger landscape. You rest your head against the wooden wall and allow yourself to drift between waking and sleeping. The coach continues forward. The horses continue their work. The driver continues watching the road. Everyone has a role in this quiet winter journey. The night feels long, but there is comfort in knowing that every mile brings you closer to the next stop. The frozen trail may be difficult, but it is also carrying you through a rare moment in history. You are experiencing travel at the speed of patience, where every sound matters and every mile has a story. The storm has not defeated the stagecoach. It has simply become another part of the journey. And as the wooden coach moves deeper into the snowy darkness, you begin to understand that the frontier is not remembered only because of where people went. It is remembered because of what they endured along the way. The hours of travel continue, and the cold night outside makes every small source of comfort inside the stagecoach feel more valuable. You begin noticing things you might have ignored earlier. The way a blanket is folded carefully around someone's shoulders. The way a small container of food is protected from the cold. The way passengers quietly share what they have, understanding that warmth is not only created by fire but also by kindness. Your stomach reminds you that even a peaceful journey requires fuel. Travelling through the frontier requires energy. And people preparing for long trips understood that food was not simply something enjoyable. It was part of survival. A traveller needed meals that could last, travel well, and provide enough strength for long days on the road. You watch as one passenger opens a small package of preserved food. The smell is simple but comforting. There is something reassuring about familiar food in an unfamiliar place. The meal is not fancy. There are no elaborate dishes or carefully arranged plates. Yet in the middle of a snowy wilderness, a basic meal can feel like a feast. People in 1876 often relied on practical foods during travel. Items such as dried meat, bread, biscuits, preserved fruits, and canned goods were useful because they could survive longer journeys. Canning had become an important preservation method during the 19th century, allowing people to store food more safely for extended periods. A small container of preserved supplies could make a difficult trip much easier. You think about how different eating on the road is compared with the modern travel. Today, a traveller might search for a restaurant, order a meal, or grab a snack whenever needed. On this stagecoach journey, every item was planned before departure. There is no quick stop waiting around the next corner. There is only what you brought with you and what the next station may provide. A passenger offers a small portion of food to someone nearby. The gesture seems ordinary, but it carries meaning. Sharing supplies on a difficult journey creates trust. When people know that conditions are challenging, generosity becomes a practical form of cooperation. The warmth inside the coach comes from many sources. The blankets provide protection from the cold. The clothing layers help trap body heat. The closeness of passengers creates a small pocket of shared warmth. Even conversation helps. A friendly voice can make a freezing night feel slightly less severe. You notice the different fabrics around you. Wool blankets feel rough but dependable. Thick coats protect against the wind. Leather items carry the scent of travel and work. Nothing is designed only for appearance. Every object has a job. A fascinating small detail from the era is that some travellers carried small metal containers of hot drinks or prepared warm mixtures before setting out, especially when expecting long periods outdoors. These simple methods were early examples of people creating portable comfort long before modern travel conveniences existed. A warm drink during a cold journey could provide both physical relief and emotional reassurance. The passengers begin discussing favourite foods from home. One person mentions a meal they miss. Another describes family recipe. These conversations transform the stagecoach interior into a collection of memories. Food becomes a way of carrying home with you, even when you are hundreds of miles away. You realize that travel changes the meaning of ordinary things. A familiar taste becomes a reminder of safety. A warm drink becomes a moment of peace. A simple blanket becomes a symbol of preparation. The frontier teaches people to appreciate what they might normally overlook. The driver also needs care and attention. Unlike passengers who can rest when tired, the driver remains responsible for the journey. Travellers often understood the importance of stopping at stations where horses could be changed and people could recover. The stagecoach system depended on a network of locations that supported movement across difficult terrain. The development of stagecoach routes was closely connected with the expansion of communication and settlement in the 19th century. Mail contracts helped support many routes, allowing communities far from major cities to remain connected. A stagecoach arriving at a station could bring letters, newspapers, supplies, and news that people had been waiting to receive. You imagine a remote settlement hearing the sound of an approaching coach. People might step outside in anticipation, wondering what messages or supplies had arrived. In a slower world, the arrival of information itself could become an event. Scholars continue examining whether the hardships of frontier travel encouraged people to become more resourceful, or whether communities simply developed systems that compensated for the difficulties of the environment. The answer is not simple. Individual determination mattered, but so did cooperation, shared knowledge, and careful planning. Inside the coach, you see that balance clearly. Every passenger carries personal supplies, but everyone benefits from being part of a group. Someone shares food. Someone offers advice. Someone tells a story that keeps spirits high. Independence and cooperation exist together. The storm continues outside, but the coach has become a small sanctuary moving through the snow. The lantern glows softly. The blankets provide comfort. The The quiet sounds of people resting create a peaceful atmosphere despite the harsh conditions beyond the walls. You take another moment to appreciate the unusual experience. You're not simply traveling from one location to another. You're witnessing how ordinary people adapted to a demanding environment. Their solutions were not always complicated. Often, survival depended on simple choices made carefully. A warm meal, a dry blanket, a shared conversation, a patient driver, strong horses. These things may seem small, but together they create the foundation of a successful journey. As you settle back into your seat, the coach continues forward through the snow. Your body feels tired, but your mind is calm. The storm remains powerful, yet inside this wooden carriage there is a sense of quiet resilience. The travellers have created comfort where comfort was not guaranteed. The road ahead remains long, and the night still has many hours left. But for this moment, surrounded by warmth and companionship, you understand something important about frontier travel. People did not conquer difficult journeys because they had perfect conditions. They succeeded because they learned how to make difficult conditions a little more bearable. The stagecoach continues through the snowy darkness, but your attention slowly shifts toward the person guiding the entire journey. While the passengers rest, whisper, and search for comfort, the driver remains connected to every sound and movement outside. You begin to appreciate that the journey depends on someone who must stay alert while everyone else tries to sleep. You imagine sitting in the driver's position, exposed to the cold wind and falling snow. The open seat offers little protection compared with the enclosed passenger area. The driver feels the weather directly, hears the horses breathing, and watches the trail ahead with constant concentration. There is no relaxing into a comfortable seat and trusting a machine to do the work. The road requires human judgment. The driver's hands hold the reins with practiced confidence. Every small movement communicates with the horses. A gentle adjustment can encourage them forward. A careful pull can slow them down. The relationship between driver and animals is built on experience. The horses are not simply following instructions. They are responding to someone who understands their behavior. You notice how the driver studies the landscape. In the darkness, familiar landmarks become difficult to recognize. A particular tree line, a bend in the trail, or a change in the ground can provide important information. A skilled driver remembers these details because the frontier does not always provide clear signs. Driving a stagecoach in winter requires more than strength. It requires patience, observation, and the ability to make decisions quickly. A driver must consider weather, road conditions, horse health, and the needs of passengers. One careless decision could create trouble for everyone inside the coach. The work was demanding, and stagecoach drivers developed reputations for toughness and skill. Some became famous figures in local communities because people depended on them for transportation and communication. Their names could become connected with reliability, bravery, and knowledge of the trails they travelled. You think about how different this role is from modern transportation. Today, drivers have technology that provides directions, weather information, and safety assistance. In 1876, much of that knowledge lived inside a person's memory and experience. The driver carried a mental map built from countless hours on the road. A curious detail from stagecoach history is that some experienced drivers developed unique habits for communicating with their horses through specific sounds and signals. These methods could vary from one driver to another. A phrase, a whistle, or movement might have a particular meaning within that partnership. It shows how much skill was hidden inside what passengers simply saw as a person holding reins. The horses continue forward, their hooves pressing into the snow. You can almost feel the effort required with each step. They are powerful, but they are also living creatures that need care. Successful drivers understood that treating horses well was not only a matter of kindness, it was necessary for completing the journey. You remember the quiet passengers' stories from earlier and realize how much knowledge was carried through experience. People who traveled these routes learned from those who came before them. Advice about trails, weather, stations, and animals passed from one generation of travellers to another. The stagecoach system itself depended on many skilled workers. The driver was visible, but others supported the journey behind the scenes. Stable workers cared for horses, mechanics repaired equipment, station workers prepared supplies. A successful trip was never the achievement of one person alone. The frontier often creates images of individuals facing challenges alone, but the reality was more connected. Communities survived because people shared knowledge and resources. Even the most independent traveller relied on systems created by many others. Researchers continue exploring how much influence individual stagecoach drivers had on the success of these transportation networks. Some believe skilled drivers were the essential factor because their decisions determined safety and efficiency. Others emphasize the larger system of routes, stations, animals, and workers that made travel possible. The story is not only about one person holding the reins, it is about an entire world working together. Inside the coach, you begin to understand why passengers respected experienced drivers. They were not simply employees completing a route. They were guides through unfamiliar landscapes. They carried responsibility for lives, supplies, and valuable information moving across difficult territory. The storm outside becomes stronger for a moment, and the coach shifts slightly. You hear the driver respond immediately. The horses adjust their pace. The movement becomes steady again. It happens so smoothly that some passengers may not even wake up. But you notice, that small moment reveals the quiet skill involved in this journey. Many of the most important actions happen without drama. There are no grand speeches or heroic poses. There is simply someone paying attention at exactly the right time. You look out into the darkness and think about the patience required for this kind of life. The driver cannot rush the storm away. The driver cannot force the trail to become easier. The only option is to make careful choices, one moment at a time. There is something calming about that idea. The stagecoach moves forward not because conditions are perfect, but because the people involved understand how to continue despite uncertainty. The driver accepts the road as it is and works with it. The hours pass slowly, the storm continues, the horses continue, the driver continues. This steady determination becomes the heartbeat of the journey. You close your eyes again, listening to the sounds outside. The reins shift softly, the wheels turn beneath you. The driver's quiet presence remains at the front of the coach, guiding everyone through the frozen night. The stagecoach may be a small wooden vehicle surrounded by a huge wilderness, but under the careful guidance of an experienced driver, it becomes something more. It becomes a moving shelter, a connection between distant places, and a reminder that difficult journeys are often completed through patience rather than speed. The stagecoach continues through the storm, carrying you deeper into a world where every object, every habit, and every small decision has a purpose. After hours inside the coach, you begin to notice details that were invisible when the journey first began. The worn leather straps, the carefully packed bags, the old blankets, and even the smallest personal items all tell stories about the people who depended on this way of travel. You look around the coach and realise that this cramped wooden space is filled with pieces of everyday frontier life. A small container of food reveals how travellers prepared for uncertainty. A folded letter shows the importance of communication across great distances. A carefully repaired coat suggests that people valued their belongings because replacing them was not always easy. The frontier was a place where practical knowledge mattered. People learned how to use what they had, repair what they owned, and adapt when circumstances changed. Unlike a modern world where many objects are replaced quickly, 19th century travellers often depended on maintaining their tools and possessions for years. You run your fingers across the edge of your blanket and imagine the many hands that may have touched similar blankets during other journeys. Travellers carried items that were useful, but those objects also carried memories. A coat could remind someone of home. A pocket watch could represent a family connection. A small photograph could provide comfort during a lonely night on the road. The stagecoach itself is another example of practical design. It was not built to create a luxurious experience. It was created to solve a problem. How could people move across large distances where roads were rough and settlements were far apart? The answer was a vehicle strong enough to handle difficult terrain while carrying passengers, supplies, and mail. During the 19th century, transportation companies created networks of routes connecting growing communities. These routes became essential parts of frontier life, especially in regions where railroads had not yet arrived. A stagecoach station could serve as a place for changing horses, resting travellers, and exchanging information. You imagine arriving at one of these stations after a long journey. The first sight of a building with warm light glowing through the windows would feel almost magical. After hours surrounded by snow and darkness, a simple room with a fire could seem like the most comfortable place on earth. A surprising detail from old travel accounts is that some passengers carried small sewing kits during long journeys. These tiny tools allowed people to repair clothing, blankets, or bags when damage occurred on the road. A needle and thread might seem insignificant, but in a world where replacement was difficult, such items could become extremely valuable. You think about how much patience was required during this period. A torn coat could not simply be replaced with a quick purchase. A broken strap could not be solved by ordering a new one. Travellers had to be creative and careful because their comfort often depended on their ability to solve small problems. The storm outside continues, and the coach remains a place of quiet observation. You listen to the passengers sleeping and waking in turns. Each person responds differently to the long night. Some rest peacefully, some shift often, searching for a comfort. Some stare through the window, watching snow disappear into darkness. The journey gives you time to reflect on how people experience difficult situations. A challenging environment does not affect everyone in the same way. One person may remember the cold and discomfort. Another may remember the beauty of the snow-covered landscape and the kindness of strangers. Researchers continue to explore how frontier communities balanced individual independence with cooperation. Popular stories often focus on self-reliance, but daily survival usually required relationships between neighbours, travellers, workers, and local communities. A person could be independent while still depending on many others. You notice this balance inside the stagecoach. Everyone has personal belongings and personal reasons for travelling, but everyone benefits from the shared experience. The driver's skill helps passengers. The passengers' cooperation creates a calmer atmosphere. The horses make the journey possible. Every part of the system matters. The snow outside transforms the landscape into something unfamiliar. Hills become softer shapes. Trails become difficult to recognize. The storm hides details that would normally guide travelers. Yet the people inside the coach continue because they understand that movement itself is part of frontier life. A common image of the frontier is a place of endless freedom. But the reality included careful routines and practical limitations. People planned their journeys, protected their supplies, and respected the environment around them. Freedom existed alongside responsibility. You settle back into your seat and think about the unusual mixture of discomfort and beauty surrounding you. The stagecoach is cold, crowded, and far from luxurious. Yet there is something meaningful about being part of this journey. You are experiencing a moment where every mile requires attention and every small comfort matters. The coach moves forward, and the objects around you seem less like ordinary travel equipment and more like companions. The lantern, the blankets, the bags, and the wooden walls all contribute to the experience. They are reminded that history is not only found in famous events, it is also found in everyday things people used to survive ordinary days. The storm begins to settle slightly, though the cold remains. The passengers become more comfortable with the rhythm of travel. What once felt unfamiliar now feels almost natural. The stagecoach has its own language, and you are beginning to understand it. You hear the wheels turning beneath you and the horses moving steadily ahead. The darkness outside still stretches across the frontier, but inside the coach there is a quiet confidence. The travellers have adapted. They have learned the patterns of the journey. They have discovered that even a difficult night can contain moments of peace. As you drift closer to sleep, you realize that the hidden details of this journey are what make it memorable. Not just the storm, not just the distance, not just the destination. The real story is found in the small choices, the shared supplies, and the ordinary objects that helped people continue moving forward. The storm has been with you for so long now that it almost feels like another passenger inside the stagecoach. You no longer react to every gust of wind or every shake of the wheels. Instead, you have learned the language of the journey. The sounds that once seemed unfamiliar now form a quiet background melody. The coach moves, the horses breathe, the snow falls, and the night continues. You find yourself becoming more reflective as the hours pass. The darkness outside encourages thoughts that might not appear during a busy day. Without the usual distractions of modern life, your mind begins to wander. You think about the people sitting around you, the choices that brought them here, and the enormous world beyond the small circle of a lantern light. A stagecoach journey like this creates a strange relationship with time. Minutes can feel incredibly long when the road is difficult, yet entire hours can disappear while you listen to the movement of the coach. The journey is not measured only by distance, it is measured by patience, endurance, and the small moments that fill the space between departure and arrival. You look at the sleeping passengers and wonder about the lives waiting for them at the end of the trail. Someone may be travelling toward a new job. Someone may be returning after a long absence. Someone may be searching for a fresh beginning in a distant settlement. Every person carries a private story that the storm cannot completely hide. The frontier in 1876 was a place of movement and change. Communities were growing, transportation networks were expanding, and many people were seeking new opportunities across the country. The same year also saw the celebration of the United States Centennial, a major national event that reflected ideas about progress and expansion. Yet behind those large celebrations were ordinary people experiencing everyday challenges like the one you're facing tonight. You think about how history often remembers major events while overlooking quiet moments. A stagecoach moving through a snowstorm may never appear in a grand textbook chapter. But for the passengers inside, it is an important part of their lives. History is made not only by famous figures, but also by countless people completing ordinary tasks under difficult conditions. The coach continues forward, and you notice the small signs of human resilience around you. A passenger wakes briefly and adjusts a blanket before returning to sleep. Someone checks that their belongings are secure. The driver continues watching the trail. Nobody gives a speech about courage, they simply continue. One unexpected detail about 19th century travel is that some passengers carried small journals or notebooks to record their experiences. These personal writings sometimes preserved descriptions of weather, landscapes, and daily struggles that might otherwise have disappeared. A simple note written during a difficult journey could later become a valuable glimpse into ordinary life. You imagine someone sitting in this same type of coach, writing by lantern light about the sound of snow against the windows or the strange feeling of travelling through darkness. The words might seem ordinary to the writer, but years later they could reveal what travel truly felt like. The storm encourages you to notice the difference between seeing a landscape and experiencing it. A person passing quickly through this region might remember only snow-covered fields and frozen trees, but you remember the sounds, the cold air, the movement of the coach, and the conversations shared inside. Experience creates deeper memories than simple observation. The question of how much frontier hardship shaped people's personalities remains open among historians and social researchers. Some believe difficult environments encouraged patience, adaptability, and stronger community connections. Others suggest that people who were already prepared and determined were more likely to succeed in challenging places. Perhaps frontier life did not create certain qualities from nothing, but instead revealed them. You glance toward the driver again and consider the quiet responsibility being carried at the front of the coach. The driver is not thinking about becoming part of history. The driver is thinking about the next stretch of trail, the condition of the horses, and getting everyone safely forward. These practical decisions are the foundation of survival. Inside the coach, the storm has created a temporary world. The outside landscape feels enormous, but the interior feels close and familiar. The passengers share warmth, silence, and the simple understanding that everyone wants the same thing to reach the destination safely. You begin to understand why journeys like this became powerful memories for many people. Difficulty has a way of making ordinary moments stand out. A warm drink tastes better after hours of cold. A friendly conversation feels more meaningful during isolation. A safe arrival feels more rewarding after uncertainty. The snow continues falling outside, but the stagecoach keeps moving. The storm has not disappeared, yet it no longer feels like an enemy. It has become part of the experience. The weather, the road, the passengers, and the horses are all connected in this single moment. You close your eyes and listen again. The sound of the wheels becomes softer in your awareness. The movement feels almost like a gentle rocking motion. Your thoughts slow down as the coach continues through the frozen night. There is something peaceful about accepting the journey as it is. You cannot control the storm, you cannot change the road. You can only settle into the moment and trust the people and animals carrying you forward. The frontier teaches this lesson repeatedly. Progress does not always come quickly. Sometimes it arrives one careful step at a time, 1 mile at a time, one quiet decision at a time. The stagecoach continues through the snow, carrying stories, memories, and hopes toward the distant station ahead. The night remains cold, but inside the wooden walls there is gentle warmth created by shared experience. You are still traveling, still waiting, and still listening to the sounds of a world moving at a slower pace. The darkness that surrounded the stagecoach for so many hours slowly begins to soften. You notice the change before you truly see it. The storm sounds different. The wind is calmer. The movement of the coach feels less like a struggle and more like a steady continuation of the journey. Somewhere beyond the snowy horizon, morning is beginning to arrive. You open your eyes and see the first hints of light spreading across the landscape. The world that seemed endless and mysterious during the night is slowly returning. Shapes appear again. Trees become trees instead of shadows. The trail becomes visible beneath the fresh layer of snow. The frontier reveals itself once more, after spending so many hours surrounded by darkness. Daylight feels almost surprising. You realize how much the night changed your perception of the journey. Without sunlight, every sound seemed larger, and every obstacle seemed closer. Now, with the morning light arriving, the landscape feels calmer. The passengers begin waking gradually. Someone stretches carefully, discovering that sleeping inside a moving stagecoach is not exactly the same as resting in a comfortable bed. Another traveller looks outside with curiosity, perhaps relieved to see the storm has weakened. Quiet greetings are exchanged, and the coach slowly returns to life. You notice the expressions on everyone's faces. There is tiredness, but there is also satisfaction. The passengers have shared a difficult night and reached a new stage of the journey together. They have not simply waited for morning, they have endured the hours that came before it. The winter landscape outside is beautiful in a way that feels almost unreal. Snow covers the ground like a thick blanket. Tree branches hold delicate layers of frost. The early sunlight reflects across the frozen surface, creating a pale glow. The same environment that created difficulty during the night now appears calm and almost welcoming. This contrast reveals something important about frontier life. Nature was never simply an enemy. It provided beauty, resources, and opportunities. But it also demanded respect. People who lived and travelled through these environments understood that the landscape could change quickly. Records from the period show that winter travel remained a major challenge for communities across the country. Before modern weather forecasting and transportation systems, people depended heavily on experience and observation, understanding seasonal patterns, local geography, and travel conditions could make the difference between a successful journey and a dangerous one. You watch the driver guide the horses through the morning light. The careful work continues, but there is a new feeling in the air. The worst of the storm appears to have passed. The horses move with renewed energy, and the coach follows the trail with greater confidence. A small but interesting detail from winter travel is that some stagecoach stations kept supplies of extra clothing and basic necessities for unexpected delays. These stations were not just places to stop briefly. They were important support points where travellers and animals could recover before continuing. You imagine the activity at one of these stations. Horses are cared for, passengers warm themselves, travellers exchange information about the trail ahead. Someone may describe a difficult section of a road, while another person shares news from a distant town. These small gatherings helped connect isolated communities. The Stagecoach journey reminds you that travel was once deeply social. A traveller was rarely separated from the people and places along the route. Every stop created an opportunity for conversation, assistance, and the exchange of knowledge. As the coach continues, you begin recognizing the small signs of progress. The snow is not as deep in some areas. The road appears more familiar to the driver. The passengers seem more relaxed. The journey is not finished, but the uncertainty has become easier to carry. Experts continue to explore how people in frontier regions understood their relationship with the natural world. Some researchers emphasize adaptation and practical knowledge, while others focus on cultural beliefs and traditions that shaped how people interpreted weather and landscapes. The way people responded to nature was influenced by both experience and imagination. You look out at the quiet fields and think about the people who travelled these routes before you. They saw the same sunrise, felt the same cold air, and listened to similar sounds. The details may have changed, but the human experience remains familiar. There is comfort in realizing that difficult nights eventually become memories. The storm that felt endless only hours ago is now something behind you. This does not mean the journey becomes easy, but it does mean you have moved through another challenge. The passengers begin sharing small observations about the morning. Someone comments on the beauty of the snow. Someone jokes about the uncomfortable seats. The humour feels warmer now because everyone knows they have already overcome the hardest part of the night. You smile and settle back into your seat. The stagecoach still moves slowly. The road is still rough. The weather is still cold. But the feeling has changed. The darkness has lifted, and with it comes a renewed sense of possibility. The frontier morning has a special kind of silence. It is not empty. It is filled with small sounds, horses stepping through snow, wheels turning over the trail, the distant movement of wind through trees, the quiet voices of travellers beginning another day. You breathe in the cold morning air and appreciate the strange beauty of this experience. You entered the journey expecting discomfort and uncertainty. You found those things, but you also found companionship, patience, and moments of unexpected peace. The stagecoach continues toward the next station, carrying you through a landscape transformed by snow and sunlight. The storm has left its mark, but it has also revealed something about the people inside the coach. They are adaptable. They are patient. They are capable of finding comfort even when conditions are far from perfect. As the morning grows brighter, you watch the trail unfold ahead. The journey continues, but the hardest darkness has passed. The snowy frontier stretches before you, quiet and endless, waiting to reveal what comes next. The stagecoach continues through the morning snow, and for the first time in many hours, you sense that the journey is moving toward a place of rest. The storm has passed, the sky has opened, and the trail ahead appears less mysterious. Yet there is still a quiet excitement among the passengers, because everyone knows that the next station means warmth, food, and a chance to step onto solid ground again. You watch the landscape slowly change as the coach moves forward. The endless white fields begin to show more signs of human presence. A fence appears in the distance. A small trail marker stands beside the road. Smoke rises faintly from somewhere beyond the trees. These details may seem ordinary, but after a night in the wilderness, they feel like welcoming signals. The idea of reaching a station carries a special meaning during a stagecoach journey. It is not simply a place to stop. It is a point of connection. Travellers can rest. Horses can be cared for. Supplies can be replaced. And information can be exchanged. A station represents the cooperation required to keep transportation moving across difficult landscapes. You begin imagining the activity waiting ahead. Workers preparing for arrivals. Horses being led to shelter. Travellers stepping inside to escape the cold. Warm fire glowing in a room filled with the sounds of conversation. After hours inside a moving coach, even a simple wooden building feels like a grand destination. Stagecoach stations became important parts of transportation networks during the 19th century. They supported routes that connected communities separated by long distances. Many stations were placed at practical intervals so horses could be changed and travellers could continue without exhausting the animals. The system depended on careful planning and many people working together. You look at the horses and appreciate their role in the journey. They have carried the coach through darkness, snow, and difficult terrain. Their work has been constant and essential. When the station finally appears, it is not only the passengers who need rest, the animals deserve care as well. Inside the coach, conversation becomes more lively. The passengers who were quiet during the storm now seem ready to talk again. The difficult night has become a shared memory. Someone laughs about the uncomfortable seats. Another person mentions how long the storm felt. Small jokes appear because surviving an unpleasant experience often makes people appreciate the lighter moments afterward. You notice how quickly a group of strangers can become familiar. The same people who barely spoke at the beginning of the journey now share stories naturally. They have experienced something together, and that shared experience has created a connection. A small and unexpected detail about stagecoach travel is that some stations kept small collections of newspapers, letters, or written notices for travellers passing through. These spaces could act almost like information centres in remote areas. A person arriving after a long trip might learn about events, family news, or business matters simply by stopping for a short rest. You imagine someone entering the station and discovering a message they have been waiting for. In a slower communication system, a single letter could carry enormous emotional weight. News did not arrive instantly. People learned to value information because it required time, effort, and distance to deliver. The station gradually comes closer, and you can see more details. The building looks simple, built for function rather than beauty. Yet, to you, it appears almost welcoming. The walls represent shelter. The door represents warmth. The chimney represents the promise of a fire. You think about how frontier travellers understood comfort differently. A modern traveller might judge a hotel by its decorations or services. A 19th century traveller might judge a stopping place by more basic questions. Is there warmth? Is there food? Are the animals safe? Can people rest? The interpretation of frontier hospitality remains a topic of interest among researchers. Some view these stopping places as examples of strong community cooperation, where travellers and workers supported one another. Others point out that many stations existed primarily because transportation systems required them. The reality likely included both practical necessity and genuine human kindness. The coach slows as it approaches the station. The change in movement is immediately noticeable. After hours of constant rocking, the slower pace feels unusual. The passengers begin gathering their belongings, preparing to step outside. You take a deep breath and prepare for the cold air. The door opens, and a rush of winter wind enters. It is sharper than expected, but it also feels refreshing. Your legs feel stiff after the long ride. Your body remembers every bump from the trail. Still, standing on solid ground feels wonderful. You step down from the coach and look back at the vehicle that carried you through the storm. The wooden walls are marked by travel. The wheels are covered with snow. The horses stand patiently nearby. The stagecoach does not look like a glamorous symbol of adventure. It looks like what it truly is, a hard-working tool that helped people move through challenging conditions. Around you, the station becomes alive with activity. Horses are guided away, supplies are checked, passengers enter the building seeking warmth. Voices mix together, creating a comforting sound after the quiet isolation of the trail. You enter the station and feel the warmth begin to return to your hands and face. The smell of fire and food fills the room. The simple comforts you might have ignored yesterday now feel extraordinary. The journey's not over yet. There are still miles ahead and more experiences waiting, but this moment matters. The station is proof that the travellers have moved through the hardest part of the night. You sit near the warmth, listening to the sounds of the frontier continuing outside. The storm has passed, the horses are resting, and the passengers have a brief chance to recover. For now, you allow yourself to enjoy this small victory. The stagecoach brought you safely through the snow, and the next chapter of the journey is ready to begin. You remain inside the warmth of the station for a while, listening to the sounds of the frontier moving around you. Outside, the horses rest after their difficult night. The stagecoach stands quietly nearby, waiting for the next part of its route. Inside, travellers warm their hands, share food, and exchange stories about the road behind them and the places still ahead. As you sit near the fire, you begin to see this single journey as part of something much larger. The stagecoach is not only carrying passengers through snow, it is part of a much bigger story about movement, communication, and the changing shape of American society during the 19th century. The frontier of 1876 is the place of transition. New transportation systems are expanding, towns are growing, and communities are becoming more connected. At the same time, older methods of travel remain essential in areas where newer systems have not yet reached. The stagecoach exists in this fascinating moment between the past and the future. You look around the station and notice how many different worlds meet in one place. A traveller carrying business papers might be heading toward a growing town. Another person may be searching for land or opportunity. Someone else may simply be trying to reach family. The stagecoach brings together people with different goals, backgrounds, and hopes. The growth of transportation networks changed everyday life across the country. The expansion of railroads during the 19th century dramatically altered how quickly people and goods could move. But stagecoaches continued serving many remote regions. Roads and trails still connected places where larger transportation systems could not easily operate. You think about how distance felt different in this era. A town that seems close on a modern map could feel incredibly far away. Travel required planning, patience, and cooperation. The arrival of a stagecoach could represent a major connection to the outside world. The station workers move around with practiced efficiency. They know what needs to happen when a coach arrives. Horses require attention. Supplies must be organized. Travelers need information. The entire process depends on people understanding their roles. A curious detail from transportation history is that some stagecoach companies created detailed schedules and route guides to help travellers understand expected travel times and stops. These documents were useful because journeys depended heavily on weather, road conditions, and animal changes. A schedule offered a sense of order in a world where many things remained unpredictable. You imagine a traveller studying one of these route guides before leaving. The paper might show names of stations, distances between stops, and important instructions. It was a small piece of information, but it represented preparation and confidence. The frontier is often remembered through dramatic stories of exploration and adventure, but your journey reveals another side. It's a story of ordinary systems supporting ordinary people. A stagecoach route required planning, maintenance, workers, and communities. Without those quiet efforts, the journey would not happen. You notice how the station acts as a small centre of communication. Travellers bring news from other places. Workers share information about road conditions. Messages move from one person to another in a time before instant communication. These exchanges were incredibly important. Researchers continued discussing how transportation changes affected frontier communities. Some believe new travel networks encouraged economic growth and stronger connections between distant places. Others emphasize that these changes also transformed older ways of life and created new challenges. The impact of transportation was complex, bringing opportunities while reshaping communities. You look through the station window at the stagecoach resting outside. It seems almost symbolic. The vehicle represents both persistence and change. It belongs to a world of horses, trails, and handwritten messages. Yet it also helped prepare communities for a more connected future. The people around you are part of this transformation. They are not simply passengers moving from one place to another. They are participants in a changing society. Every journey contributes to the movement of people, ideas, and goods across the landscape. You think about the larger social story behind this simple overnight trip. A person travelling for work, a family moving toward a new home, or someone carrying important information all become part of the same network. Transportation creates relationships between places that might otherwise remain separated. The fire crackles nearby, and you feel the contrast between the warmth of the station and the cold wilderness outside. The frontier is full of these contrasts. It offers opportunity but demands effort. It promises new beginnings but requires sacrifice. It creates independence while depending on cooperation. A stagecoach journey captures this balance perfectly. The passengers experience discomfort and uncertainty, but they also experience connection and discovery. The road is difficult, but the road also creates possibilities. You listen to the conversations around you. Some travellers discuss the next part of the route. Others talk about the storm they survived. A few people simply enjoy the rare comfort of sitting still after many hours of movement. The station feels temporary, but meaningful. Everyone inside knows they will soon continue onward. The fire, the food, and the shelter are brief comforts before returning to the road. You begin to appreciate how people in the past found meaning in these moments. They did not have constant entertainment or endless distractions. They experienced places more deeply because travel required attention. A station was not just a stop. It was a pause in a larger story. The frontier was shaped by countless moments like this one. Not every important event happened in a famous location or involved famous people. Sometimes history moved quietly through small buildings, along snowy trails, and inside wooden coaches carrying tired travellers. You finish your rest and prepare to continue. The stagecoach waits outside. The trail ahead remains open. The journey has already changed your understanding of travel, but there are still memories waiting to be created. You step back toward the coach with a new appreciation for the world you're moving through. This is not simply a ride across snow-covered land. It is a glimpse into a society built around movement, patience, and connection. You return to the stagecoach after your brief rest at the station, carrying with you the warmth of the fire and the renewed energy that comes from standing still for a while. The coach looks familiar now. Earlier, it was a strange wooden box waiting to carry you into uncertainty. Now it feels almost like an old companion. You recognize the worn seats, the small windows, and the sounds that have become part of your journey. As you climb inside again, you notice how different the coach feels after everything you have experienced. The same narrow space that once seemed uncomfortable now feels comforting. The same wooden walls that offered little protection during the storm now represent safety. Your understanding has changed because your memories are attached to every part of it. The passengers return one by one, bringing their own quiet reflections from the station. Everyone seems slightly different after the night they shared. The storm created a bond that did not exist when the journey began. People who started as strangers now exchange familiar smiles and small comments. You settle into your seat and think about the moments that stand out most. You remember the first sounds of departure, when the horses pulled away from the frontier town. You remember the growing storm, the conversations in the darkness, and the feeling of arriving at the station after hours of uncertainty. A journey is often remembered not because every moment was comfortable, but because certain moments become meaningful. The cold air, the rough road, and the cramped space all become part of the story. Difficult experiences often create the strongest memories because they require attention and adaptation. The stagecoach continues forward, carrying you through the snowy landscape. The storm has passed, but the winter environment still shapes the journey. Snow remains along the trail. The air remains sharp and cold. The frontier continues to demand patience. You look around at the objects inside the coach once again. The lantern, the blankets, and the travel bags no longer seem like simple items. They represent preparation and resilience. Every object helped someone continue moving when conditions were challenging. The history of stagecoach travel is filled with these small details. Large transportation systems are often remembered through major achievements, but everyday objects reveal how people actually lived. A blanket, a food container, or a repaired piece of clothing can tell a story about adaptation. One easily overlooked detail from 19th century travel is that passengers often marked their belongings carefully because travel involved crowded conditions and frequent movement between stops. Simple labels, initials, or identifying marks helped prevent confusion when many people carried similar bags and supplies. A small mark on a suitcase could save a traveller from losing something important. You imagine someone preparing for this journey before leaving home. They carefully choose what to bring because every item has weight and value. Too much creates difficulty. Too little creates risk. Packing becomes a form of planning for uncertainty. The coach moves steadily along the trail, and you begin thinking about the people who travelled these routes before and after you. Their reasons may have been different, but their experiences shared common themes. They faced distance, weather, and uncertainty while searching for connection or opportunity. The role of transportation in shaping communities remains a subject of ongoing discussion among historians. Some researchers highlight how travel networks helped create economic growth and cultural exchange. Others focus on how these same systems changed landscapes and disrupted existing patterns of life. Transportation brought people together, but it also transformed the places it connected. You look outside and watch the snowy landscape pass by. The frontier appears peaceful now, but you understand the effort required to move through it. The beauty of the scenery exists alongside the difficulty of reaching it. The passengers begin sharing memories of the previous night. Someone mentions the strongest gust of wind. Another remembers a funny moment when everyone shifted at the same bump in the road. The conversation is lighter now because the danger has passed. There is something comforting about how people transform challenges into stories. A difficult experience becomes a memory. A frightening moment becomes a tale told beside a fire. A long night becomes something people remember years later. You think about how many stories were created inside stagecoaches. Travellers met briefly, shared part of a journey, and then continued in different directions. Some connections lasted, others disappeared after arrival. Yet each meeting became part of the larger movement of people across the frontier. The coach continues its steady rhythm, and you allow yourself to relax. The road is still uneven, but you are no longer fighting against every movement. You have learned how to exist within the journey. The rocking motion has become familiar. The sounds has become calming. You realize that travel changes the traveler. You entered this stagecoach expecting a simple ride through winter weather. Instead, you discovered a world of patience, cooperation, and adaptation. The journey has taught you to notice things that might otherwise disappear. A quiet morning passes outside the windows. The horses continue forward. The driver maintains the route. The passengers continue toward their destinations. The world moves at the same slow pace it has followed for generations. You rest your hands on the blanket and think about the meaning of this small adventure. The stagecoach is not only a vehicle, it is a place where stories meet. It carries people through landscapes, but it also carries memories. The trail ahead continues, and more experiences wait beyond the next horizon. Yet a part of you remains connected to the moments already past. The sound of the storm, the warmth of the station, the voices of fellow travellers, the quiet strength of the horses. The journey is still moving, but now you carry more than your belongings. You carry the memory of a night spent inside a wooden coach during a frontier snowstorm. A night that revealed how ordinary people found comfort, courage, and connection in a challenging world. The stagecoach continues beyond the snowy trail that carried you through the storm, and the landscape begins to feel less like a challenge and more like a memory slowly forming. You have travelled far enough that the sounds and sensations of the journey have become familiar. The creaking wood, the steady movement of the horses, and the quiet conversations of passengers now feel like parts of a story you already know. You look back in your mind to the beginning of the journey. You remember standing in the frontier town, surrounded by warm lights and the promise of departure. You remember the first moments inside the coach, when every sound seemed unfamiliar and every bump in the road felt surprising. Now, after the storm and the long hours of travel, the stagecoach feels almost like a place of reflection. The winter landscape continues to stretch around you, but the feeling has changed. At first, the snow represented uncertainty. It hid the road and made every mile more difficult. Now, the snow appears as part of the scenery, a reminder of what you and the other travellers have experienced together. This shift in perspective reveals something important about historical travel. People in the past were not simply enduring hardship. They were also creating routines, finding moments of beauty, and building connections within difficult circumstances. A journey could be challenging and meaningful at the same time. The stagecoach era existed during a period of major transformation in transportation. Railroads were expanding across the country, changing how quickly people and goods could move between distant places. Yet stagecoaches remained essential in many areas, because they could reach communities beyond the railroad lines. Different forms of transportation often existed together, each serving a different need. You watch the driver guide the coach along the route and think about how this system worked. A successful journey depended on many parts functioning together. The vehicle had to be maintained. Horses needed care. Stations needed supplies. Drivers needed experience. Passengers needed patience. A small but fascinating detail from the world of stagecoach travel is that some routes use different types of vehicles depending on the landscape and purpose of the journey. Not every coach was identical. Some were designed for carrying more passengers, while others focused on speed or handling difficult terrain. Travel solutions were often adapted to local conditions. You imagine the people who made these decisions. They studied roads, weather patterns, and passenger needs. They understood that one design could not solve every transportation problem. The frontier required flexibility. The passengers around you continue their own journeys. Some will leave the coach at the next stop, others will continue farther. The temporary community created during the storm will eventually separate, but the shared experience remains. You think about how often human history is shaped by brief encounters. A traveller shares a conversation with a stranger. A driver offers guidance. A station worker provides shelter. These small interactions may seem ordinary, but they create the connections that allow societies to function. The role of stagecoach travel in shaping communities remains interpreted in different ways by historians. Some emphasize the importance of these routes in encouraging settlement and communication. Others point out that transportation networks also reflected larger economic and social changes already taking place. The stagecoach was both a practical tool and a symbol of a changing world. You look out at the trail ahead and consider how different life feels when movement is slow. Modern travel often focuses on speed, reaching destinations as quickly as possible. This journey has shown you another approach. Here, the experience of travelling matters as much as the arrival. Every mile has offered something to notice: the changing weather, the behaviour of the horses, the conversations inside the coach, the quiet moments when everyone simply listened to the road. These details create a deeper connection with the landscape. The frontier was never just a place on a map. It was an experience shaped by movement, uncertainty, and adaptation. People arrived with hopes and expectations, but the environment required them to adjust. Success often came from patience rather than control. You settle comfortably into your seat and allow the rhythm of the coach to carry your thoughts. The journey no longer feels like something you must endure. It feels like something you are witnessing. The stagecoach becomes a moving window into another era. You think about the people who travelled these routes when they had no other choice. Their stories were often not dramatic. They were ordinary people making practical decisions. They packed supplies. They waited through storms. They continued when conditions were difficult. A journey like this reminds you that history is built from countless small acts. A person repairing a wheel, a worker caring for horses, a traveller sharing food. a driver watching the road through a storm. These actions rarely become famous, but they keep the world moving. The afternoon light begins to change, casting softer colours across the snowy landscape. The trail ahead appears peaceful. The same land that challenged you now seems calm and welcoming. You understand that the frontier was never simply harsh or beautiful. It was both. The stagecoach continues forward, carrying you beyond the storm and toward the final memories of this journey. The passengers remain quiet, perhaps lost in their own thoughts. Everyone has experienced the same road differently, but everyone has been changed by it. You place your hand against the wooden wall one more time and feel the familiar vibration of the moving coach. This sound has followed you from the beginning. It represents travel, patience, and connection. The winter journey is slowly becoming something you will remember rather than something you are still surviving. The storm has passed. The difficult miles are behind you. What remains are the lessons carried forward from the road. The stagecoach continues toward the horizon, leaving temporary tracks across the snow. Soon, this part of the journey will become another story shared beside a warm fire. But for now, you remain inside the moving coach, listening to the quiet sounds of a world travelling at the speed of horses. The stagecoach continues along the final stretch of this winter journey, and the world outside seems quieter than before. The storm has moved on, the hardest miles have passed. What remains is the gentle rhythm of travel, the familiar sound of the wheels, and the peaceful feeling that comes after overcoming something difficult. You sit inside the wooden coach and allow yourself to notice the details one last time. The lantern glows softly. The seats are worn but familiar. The passengers sit in comfortable silence, no longer strangers sharing a difficult ride, but travellers connected by a memory they will carry long after they leave this road. The frontier landscape stretches around you, covered in snow and touched by the calm light of the changing sky. It is a landscape that has tested everyone inside the coach, yet it has also offered moments of beauty. The same cold wind that created difficulty also shaped the peaceful scene outside your window. You think about the journey as a whole. It began with uncertainty in a small frontier town. It continued through darkness, snow, and exhaustion. It brought conversations with strangers, moments of discomfort, and unexpected kindness. Now, as the coach moves forward, the experience feels less like a struggle and more like a story you were fortunate enough to witness. The stagecoach represents a fascinating period in history when older traditions and new possibilities existed together. By the late 19th century, railroads had transformed transportation across much of the country. But stagecoaches still remained important for many communities beyond the reach of rail lines. They connected people who might otherwise have remained separated by enormous distances. You imagine the countless journeys that happened before and after this one. Different passengers sat in similar seats. Different drivers guided similar routes. Different storms challenged different travellers. Each journey was unique, but all shared the same basic human experiences of patience, hope, and determination. One small detail that often surprises people about frontier travel is how much travellers depended on routine, a regular route, a familiar station, a trusted driver, or a reliable horse could provide a sense of stability in a world where so much remained uncertain. Even in difficult conditions, people created patterns that helped them continue. You think about the quiet skills that made journeys possible. Someone repaired the coach before departure. Someone prepared supplies. Someone cared for the horses. Someone maintained the station where travellers rested. History often celebrates major discoveries and famous figures, but everyday work supported those larger stories. The meaning of frontier travel continues to be interpreted in different ways by historians. Some view these journeys as examples of independence and personal courage. Others emphasize the networks of cooperation that made survival possible. The discussion remains open because both ideas reveal important parts of the experience. You look at the passengers beside you and realize that this journey was never only about reaching a destination. The destination mattered. Of course. Everyone wanted to arrive safely, but the road itself created memories that could not have existed any other way. The businessman who once guarded his papers became a storyteller during the storm. The quiet traveller shared wisdom from previous journeys. The passenger carrying personal belongings revealed the importance of memory and connection. Each person added something to the journey. You think about how different travel feels when every mile requires attention. There are no endless distractions, no rushing from one activity to another. Instead, there is time to notice small things, the sound of snow, the movement of horses, the warmth of a shared meal, the kindness of someone offering help. The frontier demanded awareness. People had to understand their surroundings because nature could change quickly. Weather, distance, and geography shaped daily life. Travellers learned to respect what they could not control and prepare carefully for what they could. As the stagecoach continues, the trail behind you slowly disappears beneath new snow. The marks left by the wheels will eventually fade. The footsteps of passengers will vanish. The journey itself will become invisible in the landscape. But the memory remains. You imagine future travellers passing through the same region and never knowing about this particular night. They may see only trees, fields, and roads. They may not hear the conversations that happened inside the coach or feel the cold air that surrounded it. Yet every landscape contains countless unseen stories. The stagecoach moves closer to the end of this chapter. The passengers begin gathering their belongings. Small preparations begin. A coat is adjusted. A bag is lifted. A final glance is given toward the road behind. You feel a quiet sense of gratitude for the experience. The journey was not comfortable in the modern sense. It was cold, crowded, and uncertain. But it offered something different. It showed you a world where people moved more slowly and noticed more deeply. The horses continue forward. The driver guides them with steady hands. The coach follows the trail toward its destination. Everything continues as it has for countless journeys before. You take one final look through the window. The snowy frontier stretches peacefully beneath the sky. The storm that once seemed overwhelming is now part of the memory. The darkness that once felt endless became a night filled with voices, warmth, and shared determination. The journey of sleeping in an 1876 stagecoach during a frontier snowstorm was never only about surviving the cold. It was about discovering how people created comfort in uncomfortable places. It was about understanding how ordinary travellers became part of a larger story. As the stagecoach finally approaches rest, you carry the sounds of the road with you, the wheels turning, the horses moving, the wind passing over the snow. These sounds belong to another time, but they remain close enough to imagine. The wooden coach slows. The journey is nearly complete. The frontier becomes quiet again, and somewhere between the final movement of the wheels and the first moment of rest, You realize that every journey leaves something behind, not just tracks in the snow, not just memories, but a small connection to the people who travelled before you. The fire burns softly as the journey fades into memory. You no longer feel the cold wind against the coach windows or the movement of the wheels beneath you. Instead, you imagine the stagecoach resting peacefully beneath the winter sky, its work complete, its passengers safe and warm. The frontier grows quiet. Snow settles gently over the trail. The horses rest after their long effort. The station lights glow in the distance, offering a small reminder that every difficult journey eventually reaches a place of comfort. You allow your thoughts to slow. The voices of the travellers become softer. The sound of the storm becomes a distant whisper. The wooden walls of the coach become a symbol of shelter rather than hardship. You breathe slowly and imagine the peaceful landscape outside. The trees stand quietly beneath their blanket of snow. The sky stretches endlessly above the sleeping frontier. Everything feels still, patient, and calm. The journey is over, but the story remains. A night of cold, courage, friendship, and endurance has become a gentle memory carried through time. So let your eyes grow heavy. Let the old stagecoach roll softly into the distance. Let the snowy trail fade beneath the moonlight. The horses continue their quiet steps. The lantern glows warmly. The frontier rests, and you can rest too. Good night, traveller. Sweet dreams.